This episode is the first in our series where we'll be showing you how to run the 100 meters from start to finish, beginning in this video with the first 20 meters of the race. Before the gun goes off, sprinters need to ensure they're in the most optimal position to get the best possible start, and the first part of this process is setting up the starting blocks. When setting up the blocks, one block will be placed further behind the other, and the foot resting on this block will be the foot that takes the first step in the race. There is some debate around which block to put your more dominant foot on, as well as uncertainty around whether your dominant foot is your most coordinated foot, the one you naturally kick a ball with for example, or the one that you can simply produce more power from. Some sources will say that having your most powerful foot on the front block is important when it comes to pushing off, but having your more naturally coordinated foot on the back block should take precedence as your first step is crucial in setting up a good race. However, some athletes have been known to switch their front and back legs throughout their career, so it is athlete dependent. It's recommended to set your front block to 45 degrees while setting the back block to a slightly steeper angle around 55 degrees or the next notch on the block setting, but again this setting is athlete dependent. When you're behind the starting line in preparation for a race or training run, you can rest the knee of your leg you will be taking your first step with on the ground, while the toes and ball of your other foot will be in contact with the ground, with your fingers placed just behind the line. From this position, you can adjust the position of your knee and opposite foot to where they feel most comfortable, and once you have found this position, you can set your blocks accordingly. Before fixing your blocks, make sure that it feels comfortable to rise into the set position and hold it without feeling an impulse to move or twitch. You should be able to hold the position indefinitely without losing your balance, and to help with balance, it's recommended for your shoulders to be straight above your hands. Some athletes will use a method of measurement to ensure their blocks are set exactly the same distance from the start line every time, while some athletes will set up the blocks however they feel comfortable for each separate race. While some athletes may like to have their blocks placed closely together so it feels like their body is coiled up like a spring, this approach may actually reduce the amount of ground that they can cover in their first few steps, whereas leaving more space for their hind leg to come forward can allow them to get the most out of their hip flexors, thus cover more ground with their first step. Achieving a longer first step can have a big impact on your race pattern, as opening up your body right away can allow for a longer second step, and so on. When the starter calls for the athletes to get on their marks, you should place each foot on their respective blocks with the knee of your hindmost leg on the ground with your opposite knee raised from the ground. The heel of your hindmost foot shouldn't be in contact with the block, as the ball of your foot maintains contact with the block. Your thumbs and fingers should be placed just behind the line, and it's advised to keep your shoulders relaxed and your head down, then remain completely still as you wait for the starter to call set. Once the starter calls set, you raise the knee of your hindmost leg off the ground and push your hindmost foot back into the block until a sufficient amount of your foot is now in contact with the block. Many athletes will have their heel flat against the block when using larger Olympic-sized blocks. The foot of your front leg may also push back to gain more contact with the block, but to a lesser extent. Your body should raise into its upright position almost automatically, and your head should remain down, ideally with an absence of back rounding, meaning a straight line through your torso and head from the point of your hip hinge. Once you are in this position, you just need to remain still and anticipate the sound of the starter's gun, and once the gun goes off, you start to bring your hindmost leg forward, followed closely by your front leg. Many athletes will push back into the blocks with both feet simultaneously before bringing their legs forward, but the extent to which they do this depends on the individual, with athletes like Usain Bolt demonstrating very little push back into the blocks, while athletes like Ben Johnson use the blocks to catapult themselves forward. Some athletes may focus on bringing their hindmost foot forward with no pushback into the block, while simultaneously pushing back their opposite leg into the block. Before your legs come forward, your hands should leave the ground as you raise your arms, and as your hind leg begins to come forward, your corresponding arm should drive backwards to the point where it reaches 90 degrees and your elbow has straightened out. Your opposite arm should stay bent at the elbow while you bring your hand up towards your head. In the initial steps of a race, keeping your foot close to the ground while driving your legs forward helps to prevent you from spending too much time in the air, and this is referred to as low heel recovery. Some athletes ensure that they're maintaining low heel recovery by performing an action known as the toe drag, where their toe drags along the ground as they drive their legs forward, but when trying to exclude every possible hindrance from a race, it's best if low heel recovery can be achieved without the toe drag. A beginner sprinter may want to emulate a Safa Powell start by performing the toe drag, but when they're only producing a fraction of the force that Powell can when exiting the blocks, while also achieving less optimal angles, consciously implementing the toe drag isn't likely to serve any benefit. While most athletes will drive their legs straight forward when coming out of the blocks for maximum efficiency, some athletes' anatomy may limit just how straightforward their legs can drive, while some athletes will adopt a staggered step approach where their first couple of steps are the widest, then each step gets narrower until they get to their natural step width. Since this video will be covering the execution of the first 20 meters of a 100 meter race, I will outline some commonalities among elite sprinters in the first 20 meters of a race. The first point to note is that most elite athletes will not have gotten into fully upright running by the time that they've reached the 20 meter mark, so they will still be in their drive phase at that point. For this reason, the orthodox approach is to focus on your drive phase for the entirety of the first 20 meters, while planning to enter fully upright running somewhere between 20 to 40 meters. For simplicity, I refer to the transition stage prior to becoming fully upright as part of the drive phase. When I speak about upright running, I'm referring primarily to the angle of the athlete's torso which they hold throughout the majority of their race, rather than focusing on when an athlete's head comes up fully, since some athletes keep their head down even after their torso is fully upright. At the beginning of a race, the horizontal force produced by an athlete is at its greatest, with typically around 55% of the force from the athlete being directed horizontally. As an athlete gets further into the race, these horizontal forces continue to reduce, but it's because of the horizontal forces that the athlete is able to take their velocity from zero all the way up to their top speed, while the vertical forces they produce act to prevent them from falling over. When an athlete has reached their top speed, the vertical forces they are producing stabilize at around 6% of their total force. While at top speed, the net forces of the drag versus the runner's horizontal force are balanced, so all an athlete needs to do to maintain speed is continue applying vertical forces, as Newton's first law states that a body in motion will remain moving at a constant speed unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. Having had a look at the physics of acceleration, let's take things back to where we left off with the block starts. When the ball of your foot has landed on the ground with your first step, you should be in the process of pulling through your second leg to initiate your second step, and while doing so, you want to avoid any sudden changes in torso angle, since the goal is to keep your legs pushing backwards into the track, maintaining high levels of horizontal force at the start of your acceleration. Some coaches may give their athletes a cue to stay low when coming out of the blocks, but simply trying to keep your body low won't serve as a benefit if it's not applied correctly. It's ideal for your foot to land behind your center of mass when trying to put force backwards into the track during initial acceleration, whereas if your foot is landing in front of your center of mass, keeping your torso crouched over for the sake of staying low isn't going to serve as a benefit, since the more upright athlete in this example is actually applying force more efficiently. Even at the elite level, not all athletes are going to come out of the blocks at the same angles, with some being more upright after their first step than others, but even in such examples, the athletes can still have a sufficient drive phase by becoming upright in a gradual manner. A useful analogy to think of when transitioning from the low position of the block exit to fully upright running is to imagine how an airplane takes off without disrupting the passengers, getting incrementally more upright rather than changing angle in sudden spurts. Some coaches will train their athletes to exit the blocks at an angle so that they feel as though they are falling out of the blocks with gravity pulling them down, and they are relying on their initial steps to keep them from falling face first into the ground. The objective behind this is to ensure the athlete comes out at an aggressively low angle to allow them to orient as much force as possible in the horizontal direction. Coming back to mapping an athlete's start step by step, within the first few steps there will be a significant amount of forward swinging of the arms, which helps to get your body in motion and build momentum. As the race progresses and you become more upright, the movement of your arms in front of your body should gradually reduce to the point where your elbows don't go past the plane of your torso, but they will continue to swing fully backwards. Having your arms swing forward past your body once you're running upright is wasted movement, and it can lead to longer foot contact times on the ground. While accelerating, the height to which your knees come up will increase in accordance with your torso becoming more upright, and as each foot strike hits the ground faster than the last, the length of your steps naturally increase. Focusing on driving your knees forward then pushing back into the track can be beneficial during steps 3 to 6, while your first 2 steps will be focused on moving your feet away from the blocks. From the 7th or 8th step, your knees will be coming up higher as your body becomes more upright, so the ability to push back into the track won't be as pronounced as the initial steps, but you are still in the position where you can keep producing a lot of horizontal force if your switch into upright running is smooth and gradual. Seeing as many elite athletes will reach the 10 meter mark in 7 steps and begin fully upright running around 15 steps, that will leave them beyond the 20 meter mark when fully upright, since it takes less steps to get from 10 to 20 meters than 0 to 10 meters. For beginners, however, it may take them 8 or more steps to reach the 10 meter mark, meaning that if they aim to be fully upright at 15 steps to replicate a similar race pattern to professional athletes, they may end up completing 15 steps before they reach the 20 meter mark. For some athletes this won't be a problem, but for others, running 80 meters fully upright can cause them to slow down dramatically before the end of the race. Counting the amount of steps it takes you to reach the 20 meter mark, then aiming to not become fully upright until after you have completed that many steps, can be a good way to ensure you don't cut your drive phase short, so that you don't slow down excessively towards the end of the race. For the sake of comparison, I will show an example of an elite athlete from the modern era who went against the status quo when it comes to the drive phase. In his personal best equaling race in 2016, Vico had a race pattern where he became fully upright within 11 steps and before the 20 meter mark. The angle that Vico comes out of the blocks at is very steep compared to most athletes, but he still transitions gradually over the course of his first 11 steps. During the 2016 season, Vico had another race of 9.88 that required just 12 steps. However, in the season prior of 2015, his race pattern had a longer transition where he took 14 to 15 steps to begin fully upright running, which was more aligned with the rest of the field. This shows that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, and some athletes can just transition purely on instinct rather than having an identical race pattern every time. In my next video, I'll be talking about how to execute the 20 to 40 meter section of the race, so please subscribe for more content coming soon, and thanks for watching.